Now that we know all about half steps and whole steps, we can begin to take a tour of all of the accidentals that we'll encounter. So the first kind of accidental to be aware of is a sharp. So when you see the sharp symbol, which looks like this, it raises the pitch by a half step. And most of the time it results in a black key, but not always. So let's first of all talk about drawing sharps, because you're going to need to do that a few times. Here we have a note, and then the sharp goes to the left. It goes in front of the note, and it is oriented in the same location as the note. So for instance, that note, of course, is on the fourth line of the staff. So that means the center of this sharp symbol is going to be right there on the fourth line of the staff. And it's going to be in proportion in terms of size to the note. So for instance, this would be way too big, even though it is oriented okay. This is way too small. You don't want to do that. You want to find that happy medium where it's kind of on par with the size of the note. Anytime you have lower notes or higher notes, you still write the sharp to the left. You do not need a separate ledger line for the sharp symbol itself. So in this next exercise, you're just drawing sharps in front of the following notes. So here that's a space note, here that's a line note. This one we don't need a ledger line for, and that's another space note. It lives right there. And here's a little quirky thing. So in musical notation, that is when we actually see notes written out on the page, the sharp or any other accidental, we're going to cover flats and others momentarily, the sharp, as we've seen, comes before the note. But when we're talking about these notes, or even when we're writing about these notes in text, accidentals come after the letter. So for instance, let's take this one right here. Well, we have a sharp symbol and then we have the note A. But when we actually talk about this note, we would call it A sharp. And in written text, you'd see it notated as follows. So a little bit quirky. A sharp is how we speak about it, but sharp A is what it looks like when you're actually writing it in musical notation. Now, let's figure out what these sharps do to a particular key, and I've copied in the piano keyboard up here. So as we said, a sharp raises a note's pitch by a half step. So let's imagine that we are in treble clef, and let's just take that good old A sharp from before. So here is a regular A at the moment, and we can say, well, that's A right there. As soon as we put a sharp in front of it, that means we raise the pitch by a half step, which means we go to the right by one key on the piano keyboard. So this note here, if you can see it all the way up there, this note is going to be A sharp. So you would play that black key instead of the white key. Let's do another example, still in treble clef here. How about, let's do this one. There's a C, and let's say that that's the C up there on the piano keyboard. As soon as we put a sharp in front of it, we no longer will play the note C, we'll play the note C sharp. If it's raised by a half step, well, that lands us on this black key. So there's our C sharp. So far in two cases, we've wound up on black keys, but let me give you a counterexample here. So clearing that out, let's say we have this note, which we know is a B, but let's say we put a sharp in front of it. So we take the note B, which we know is over here, and we go up by a half step. Oh, well, wait a second. This time, we land on this note. Now, often, in fact, I'd say 90% of the time, often that note goes by the name of C. But it can also go by the name of B sharp, and that's exactly what we've got here. So in this case, the sharp symbol has told us not to play this white key, but to play this other white key just to the right of it. So one thing you'll notice as you go throughout this chapter is that every key on the piano keyboard has multiple names. So yes, most of the time, this note right here is called C. Sometimes it's called B sharp. Now, you'll learn exactly why that's the case when we get to the scales chapter. But for right now, just know that it's based on context. Most of the time, the context determines that C is actually the simpler way to think of it. But believe it or not, there are other contexts. For instance, when you're in the key of C sharp major, which is a particularly tricky key, Notating it as B sharp actually makes more sense, and it actually makes the piece much more readable. So we'll learn more about that, as I said, in the scales chapter, but for right now, just kind of put that somewhere in the back of your brain.